Number 10. Legends of the Dead Earth. In Legends of the Dead Earth, the surviving human population of Earth are all basically aboard a spaceship, which drifts kinda aimlessly through space as it's lost its heading. The humans have also been on the spaceship so long, they basically forgot there's even a world outside. However, Batman rises up among them to become a hero and help them once again find their way. This Batman is not the Batman, Bruce Wayne, but instead a well-meaning citizen on the spaceship who learns the truth about how they are basically lost. He takes up the mantle of the hero from old folklore, known as Batman, and inspires a girl aboard the ship named Tris Plover to help him in his fight to fix the ship's navigation system. It's actually a really depressing story though, because in the end she's like, man, I'm not gonna be alive to get to this planet. What's the point of anything? Number 9. Saint Batman. Saint Batman was the name Azrael took up in one of the Dark Multiverse alternate realities. Here, Azrael had taken up the cape and cowl in Batman's stead after his back was broken by Bane, but refused to give back the mantle, and instead of Batman defeating Jean-Paul and taking the mantle back, Azrael basically won that fight, keeping it. He turned Bruce into a shadow of his former self, removing all his limbs and keeping him alive through kind of a cybernetic life support thing, which also seemed to cause Bruce extreme pain. Years later, Bruce is saved by the son of Talia al Ghul and Bane. However, it turns out in rescuing Batman and later defeating Azrael, they really just swapped out one awful tyrant for an even worse one. And friends, before we head on to the next point, if you are loving this list, we would love if you headed over to our Facebook page and gave it a like and a follow. It really does help us out over here at YouTube, so thank you! Number 6. Jace Fox. Jace becomes Batman in the possible future we get a glimpse into through DC's Future State event. In this event, Jace Fox, also known as Tim Fox, one of the children of Batman's ally Lucius Fox, ends up becoming Batman in a cyberpunk dystopian future where Gotham has become a police state. Jace is a mysterious figure but stumbles upon Batman's tech and decides to try and use it to do some good, despite the fact that at this point all masks are outlawed in Gotham. Jace Fox keeps his vigilante deeds and persona a secret from the rest of the Fox family. Many of his combat skills come from his life as a mercenary and from Katana, who he was once a protege of. Number 7. Batman the Silenced. One perfect spine-chilling dark multiverse tale that I have loved, which even comes with its own creepy lullaby, is the Tales from the Dark Multiverse Batman Hush. In this story, we get a reimagined narrative where Batman's childhood friend, Thomas Elliot, is the one who ends up messing up Bruce's life. Tommy in his adult years allies himself with many of Gotham's villains and more usually anti-hero types after Bruce Wayne ends up in Arkham Asylum, which also was kind of part of his doing. However, Bruce isn't quite as checked out as he's been pretending to be, and he ends up escaping in order to get revenge and taking up the mantle of Batman the Silenced, an alternate version basically of Hush, and of course an alternate version of Batman. Number 6. Vampire Batman. This alternate version of Batman comes to us from the alternate Earth 43. As his moniker describes, he is a version of Bruce Wayne who transforms into a more literal version of Batman when he becomes a vampire. Batman. Get it? Cause vampire bats. Oddly enough, this is also not the only version of Batman in the multiverse that also happens to be a vampire, as you already know, because we talked about Gods and Monsters Batman as well, who's also a vampire. Despite being a vampire on Earth 43, Bruce still fights on the good side, fighting against his vampiric urges to feed on human blood. At least, initially he fights against them. At one point, Vampire Bats asks Alfred to stake him in order to prevent him from giving in to his bloodlust, after he seemingly killed the Joker by draining him of all of his blood. However, a stake through the heart doesn't actually kill Batman here, but simply leaves him in a coma. Months later, Gotham is in a pretty bad place without Batman's presence, and Alfred is forced to awaken him in hopes that Gotham will once more have a savior. Batman does go about taking out criminals, but in a very vampiric way, creating a bloodbath as his time staked and his bodily decay has resulted in the loss of his sanity. So he's there and he's killing criminals, but he's like killing criminals, and it's like a lot. Number 5. The Merciless. This alternate version of Bruce is one who ends up wielding the power of Ares in the memory of Wonder Woman. Oh yeah, and he's also the one who fought with Diana to the very end against Ares before he inevitably was kind of forced to kill her. or forced in his eyes, but in our eyes we're like, Bruce, don't do that, don't do it. This alternate version of Bruce Wayne, aka Batman, hails from the dark multiverse of Earth at -42 and is one of the Batman Who Laughs Dark Knights. To me, he represents Bruce's obsession with power and symbolizes what could very well happen if this was left unchecked. Bruce here loved Diana, but still ended up betraying her because he knew that she would not allow him to keep the power of Ares for himself and that she would rather destroy such power. So he was like, I gotta hold on to the power because I'm doing great with it, so I guess I gotta kill ya. But also, he wasn't doing that great with it. Spoiler alert. Number 4. The Bruce. This alternate version of Batman comes to us from the reality belonging to Batman I Joker. Here Batman is a tyrant and a symbol who is worshipped as a god. This is not our own Bruce Wayne, by the way, but like a dystopian, almost cyberpunk future version of the character where the people of Gotham see him as their ruler and god. In fact, I don't even know if this guy's name is actually Bruce Wayne or is Bruce at all. I think he's just a person that's elected and like that's the role you play, or that seized power. The people of Gotham worship him and his mission for vengeance. The whole comic is pretty horrifying to read and reveals how even the best of heroic intentions can be perverted over time. Nothing scarier than just humanity and the way that we think things through and can like take a good idea and make it into something a lot more sinister. That's the scariest thing of them all. Well, almost. There's a few more points. Number 3. Murder Machine. Murder Machine is an alternate version of Bruce Wayne who hails from the dark multiverse reality of Earth -44. Here Bruce Wayne turns to his friend and colleague Cyborg for help, building an AI to supplement Alfred after Bruce's longtime friend, butler, and father figure is tragically murdered. However, this AI is programmed to protect Bruce at all costs, which ends up leading the Alfred Protocol, as it's named here, to take over Bruce, replacing his human body with a mechanical, indestructible, and immortal one. Turning Bruce into the murder machine, the Alfred Protocol, which Bruce is now fully merged with, also takes away Bruce's ability to feel fear or sadness. I think you know where this is going. It's not going to a good place. In the end, it labels everyone a threat to Bruce and helps him to kill all those who could potentially harm him, including the entire Justice League. Pretty bleak stuff. Number 2. Nemesis. Nemesis is probably one of the most brutal Batman alternates we've ever encountered. Probably also because he doesn't even hail from DC Comics himself, but instead is a creation of Mark Millar's, who hails from Icon Comics. Mark Millar doesn't hail from Icon Comics, but this character does. Mark Millar does many things. Well, we do have an elaborate backstory for Nemesis, which involves him also seeking vengeance for the death of his parents, but in a much more twisted way. Since his parents were actually the worst kind of wealthy folks and murderers themselves, it's never really even confirmed that this backstory is the true backstory of Nemesis. In fact, it's even implied in the story that Nemesis could actually be multiple people who just cause mayhem and death and destruction because, well, maybe they just enjoy it? The whole idea of the character and everything that he does is pretty messed up and is quite dark. Nemesis provides a much more villainous take on the idea of vigilantes and how motivation can mess you up, or alternatively, how you really don't even need motivation to become a messed up and brutal vigilante in the first place. Also power. Lots of things about power, because that's how it goes. Number 1. Batman Who Laughs. Obviously one of the darkest and scariest alternate versions of Batman out there has to be the Batman Who Laughs. This version of Batman is actually like an amalgamation of Joker and Batman, but he is ultimately an alternate of Bruce Wayne, because he is Bruce Wayne, so a little more Bruce really than Joker in the end. He used to fight crime as Batman, but one day Joker took things too far and caused Batman to snap. And not just snap internally, but externally as well, when he actually snapped Joker's neck, killing him. Joker released a special brand of Joker venom with his last breath, which Bruce breathed in. Over time, this venom made him paranoid and homicidal, and ultimately he became the villain of the story, going so far as to kill all the members of the Bat family. Knowing they would not be able to join him, or not be willing to join him I guess I should say, well, he killed all of them at least except one. His son Damian Wayne was offered a spot at his father's side, and he ended up taking it. Batman then became the insane Batman Who Laughs and set out to conquer and reshape the entire multiverse. Which definitely means you're pretty scary. If you are like, I'm not just gonna take over this world, I'm gonna like go beyond that, That's a lot.
Coming in at number 10, it's Earth 32. Unexpected. That's probably how I would describe the Batman from Earth 32. Now, the original Batman of this universe was Bruce Wayne, who also became a Green Lantern. But when he left the Earth to serve in the Green Lantern Corps, it left the role of Batman open. And who would have guessed that of all the characters, Alexander Luthor would be the one to answer the call. First appearing in Lex Luthor Year of the Villain #1 from November 2019, this Batman was partnered up with Super Martian, a cross between a Martian like Martian Manhunter and a Kryptonian like Superman. As you can imagine, they were a powerful combo. They took up a base of operations in what looked like the Batcave mixed with the Fortress of Solitude and were assisted by Fred, their awesome robotic butler. Thanks to having the Martian as his partner, Lex Batman was well acquainted with telepathy, and while it caused him some pretty bad headaches, it was also instrumental in helping deal with the Prime Earth Lex Luthor when he showed up. Number 9. Blood League. Now, we have talked about the vampire Batman who appears in the Elseworld Batman Vampire Trilogy, and that version of Batman brings us an incredible story. While that vampire Batman inspired the Batman of Earth 43, their stories are slightly different in some crucial ways. For example, the Batman of Earth 43 intentionally sought out the dark demonic gift in order to face Dracula, instead of being unwillingly given the vampire curse from a good vampire. Batman defeated Dracula, but the curse proved too much for Bruce to handle, and he gave in to the full curse and embraced his new bloodlust. With someone like Batman as a crazed vampire, the other heroes of this Earth didn't last too long before they too were also turned into vampires, which is when, together, they formed the Blood League. I wouldn't call them heroes though. This superpowered group of vampires did enough damage on their own world that they decided to leave it and attack the planet Rann, and they were later coerced into invading the universe of Earth 13. Eventually, Batman and the Blood League even played a part in the death metal event. Number 8. Deceased. While Bruce Wayne did play a part in DC's answer to Marvel Zombies, Deceased, it was his successor that was arguably much more important. When the anti-life equation techno-organic virus infected a huge number of the Earth, Bruce got infected when he had to fight off the infected Nightwing and Tim Drake Robin. Using Mr. Freeze's cryosuit, he was able to slow down the virus long enough to study it and give information and say goodbye to the remaining Justice League and his son, Damian Wayne, who would go on to take his father's mantle at the age of just 13 years old. The fight against the anti-living eventually reached cosmic scales. The heroes eventually found themselves facing Erebos, the one who was responsible for the entire anti-living outbreak. Now, Deceased is a long comic book run, so I can't give you all the details in this short little time, but Damian essentially grows up over the run of the comic, stepping fully into his role as Batman and creating a relationship with the new Wonder Woman, Cassie. Alfred Pennyworth eventually becomes the new Spectre and bringing a cure for the anti-living, but right near the end, Damian organizes the final attack on Erebos in Limbo. Now, in an all-white batsuit that looks amazing, Damian put the life equation, the opposite to the anti-life equation, inside of himself, and he decided to detonate it inside of Erebos to destroy him and the anti-living from the inside out. He makes the ultimate sacrifice, and it's pretty awesome.
Number 7. Jason Todd. In Battle for the Cowl, Batman is believed dead, and a final message is passed on to the Bat family members. Among those summoned to hear Bruce's final words is Jason Todd, former Robin, sometimes villain, and all around just a pretty complex character and vigilante. With Bruce absent, Jason believes this is his opportunity to prove himself and take up the cape and cowl. As Batman, Jason is relentless, not shying away from bloodshed or killing the criminals he comes up against, and dons a heavily armored suit and the former mask of Michael Lane's Azrael when he was the Bat Devil mask. This version of Batman is not against using guns, making him even more deadly, especially when he obviously shoots to kill. Jason Todd's version of Batman managed to best Nightwing, Tim Drake, and Catwoman in battle, successfully defeating all of them, although in the end, Nightwing did return and managed to defeat Jason, but this was also in part due to Dick gaining the upper hand in their final fight. fight. Well, I mean, not their final fight, because this is comics, so there's a lot of stuff that happened after this, but just in regards to this specific story, I mean. Number 6, Dark Knight Returns. Of course, we have to have Dark Knight Returns, Frank Miller's dark, futuristic take on an older Bruce who chooses to return from retirement and don the cape and cowl once more. I mean, he is kinda the definition of unstoppable, is he not? This version of Batman ends up literally leaving retirement as an old man to come back and kick some butt. And he does a pretty freaking great job, I gotta admit, even almost beating Superman before seemingly dying of a heart attack, but even then, not really. So while Superman seemingly wins the ultimate and famous fight between the two of them, it's revealed that in the end it may have all just been part of Bruce's elaborate plot, meaning that as always the detective also wins in the end, especially because Superman's kinda like, yeah, I know he's still alive, it's all good. Number 5, Dick Grayson. Well, not quite as adept and skilled as Batman is, Nightwing has the range of skills to excel as Bruce's replacement, which is what happens in the New Earth continuity after Bruce is believed to have been killed in a fight against Darkseid. Dick Grayson ends up taking up the Batman mantle in his adopted father's absence, believing that Gotham needs Batman and that it would be unwise to let it be known that the original Batman is gone and dead. While Nightwing has many accomplishments as Batman, I more wanted to discuss him because I believe that not only is Dick Grayson a great option when it comes to the Batman legacy, but that recently, even outside of that, he's definitely proven himself to be unstoppable as a character, with or without the Batman mantle attached to him or even affiliated with him. Lately, he's been excelling as Nightwing, the protector of Bloodhaven, and is returning once more to lead the Titans, who will become the protectors of Bloodhaven, and obviously the protectors that Bloodhaven is desperately needing right now. A symbol of hope for a place that is sometimes presented as being even more corrupt than Gotham. However, it should also be noted that before this, Dick was also offered the opportunity to lead the Justice League, following the events of Dark Crisis, with Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman all seemingly coming together to decide that Nightwing was the best candidate to lead a new league in their absence. Of course, even though Nightwing was flattered by this, he chose instead to bring the Titans back and return as their leader. Or well, I mean, the Titans never really went anywhere, but he was like, we're gonna do Titans now instead. Ba-ba-ba. Number 4, Batman Red Sun. Batman Red Sun is definitely one of the most unstoppable Batmen around. He hails from Earth 30, an alternate world where Superman's Kal-El instead fell to Earth and landed in Soviet Russia, growing up there and becoming a Russian hero as opposed to an American one. Batman is a hero who actively fights against the Soviets, seeking revenge for the death of his parents, who were murdered by Stalin's police. Batman eventually is manipulated into taking on Superman himself, and while he does fail to kill Superman, Batman still makes an impressive attempt there. Especially impressive when you consider that this Batman, like so many others, is completely unpowered. And despite not physically winning that fight, choosing to die rather than allow himself to be captured in the end, Batman still manages to reveal the truth about the people that Superman works for, turning Superman against them and thereby getting his own revenge, despite not being alive to see it fully realized. Batman also lives on after the initial man's death that represented him, inspiring others in Russia to take up the mantle in his place and continue the fight for justice. So although the original guy that was Batman in that reality is dead, Batman still lives on and becomes unstoppable because legacy. Number 3, God of Knowledge. While still technically the main continuity Batman we currently have in the DC universe, and not in the traditional sense and alternate as in someone from another Earth or an Elseworld story, as we counted Dick Grayson before, who is also in the main continuity, I would like to present this version of Batman who represents a specific time in Bruce's life when he happened to gain the powers of Mobius, or at least the power of Mobius's chair. This was a device and tech that was initially used by Mobius, aka the Anti-Monitor, but given to the new god Metron by Mobius, before Batman ended up taking it for himself during Darkseid War. The chair grants whoever sits upon it vast knowledge, and also allows whoever pilots it to travel through time and through to various dimensions. In other words, this made Batman pretty insanely unstoppable. During Darkseid War, various heroes and villains took on new identities, becoming not new gods in terms of, the group of cosmic beings, but new gods in terms of them becoming gods, which was new gods, not new gods. Number 2, Batman in Bethlehem. In an alternate future, Damian Wayne ends up becoming Batman, and everything goes pretty crazy as a result. He takes up the mantle following the death of Dick Grayson, who ends up becoming Batman after Bruce retires. Following the death of his adopted brother, Dick Grayson, Damian sees killing as kind of the only way to deal with criminals like the Joker, who ended Dick's life in this case. However, Bruce disagrees, refusing to let Damian take up the mantle of Batman initially, and eventually kicking him out of the Batcave and Bat family as a result of his actions. Eventually, Damian would earn his father's forgiveness and his respect once more, and go on to take up the mantle, continuing to be Batman even after both Bruce's and Alfred's deaths. However, he would once again be seen as a killer, a much crueler and less forgiving version of Batman in the future. Damian even goes so far as to sell his soul to seemingly the devil, and in the end, Gotham ends up the victim of a nuclear attack in a harsh and chaotic apocalyptic futuristic world. Still, Damian never gives up, and even goes on to renegotiate his bargain with Simon Hurt, who is suggested to be the devil here. Number 1, Batman Who Laughs. Batman Who Laughs is hands down one of the most despicable and unstoppable Batman we've ever encountered, I think, in the comics. What makes him so unstoppable? Well, he's kind of an unreal combination of Batman and Joker blended together, and I would say it's that makes him so interesting, unique, and ultimately unpredictable and unstoppable. I mean, think about it. He has all the logic and skills of Batman, but the level of cruelty and off-the-wall thinking of the Joker. When he sets his mind to something, usually the Batman Who Laughs ends up on top and gets what he sets out to get. And I know what you're going to say, but Amanda, hold on a minute. Wasn't he defeated during Dark Knight's death metal? Yes, he ultimately was, but at the same time, look at all he accomplished before that. I mean, this is the guy who was able to take down one of the most powerful villains out there, Perpetua, who is older seemingly than time itself, known as one of the hands of creation, and is the mother of both the Monitor and Anti-Monitor, as well as, the World Forger. So that's pretty wild to me.
But in at number 10 is Darkwing. Starting off this list with an extremely short-lived, obvious, and purposely on-the-nose knockoff of the Dark Knight is Darkwing from the Image Comics Invincible series. When we kick off that story, the world is defended by the Guardians of the Globe, an elite group of heroes who were very obviously based on the Justice League of America. The team was composed of the Immortal, who was similar to but inherently different than Superman, Red Rush, who was based on the Flash, Aquarius, who was based on Aquaman, Martian Man based on Martian Manhunter, the Green Ghost based on Green Lantern, and the two financiers of the team, War Woman based on Wonder Woman, and of course, Darkwing. Obviously, being one of the members who funded the team, Darkwing was incredibly wealthy. He was all dark and brooding, he wore a cape, he was in peak human condition, he relied on tech and his hand-to-hand combat skills, and he had cool one-liners. And none of that saved him from his very sudden sticky end. Number 9, Captain Sunshine. Captain Sunshine of the long-running Venture Bros animation series, while absolutely superpowered and brightly dressed, is such an obvious parody of Batman, and even more specifically, Batman Beyond. The current Captain Sunshine, Chuck Scarsdale, was actually the former sidekick called Wonder Boy of the original hero Desmond, who is now hella old and essentially acts as the Alfred to Chuck. This is extremely similar to how in Batman Beyond, Bruce Wayne becomes the mentor and guy in the chair to Terry McGinnis, who is the new Batman. But Venture Bros goes beyond all the other Batman knockoffs on this list by getting the actual voice of Batman, the late Kevin Conroy, to be the voice of Captain Sunshine. Actually, side note, if we're talking about Batman ripoffs voiced by Batmen, Adam West also did the voice of Catman on the Fairly Odd Parents, so that's a little fun fact for you. And moving on to number 8, Rorschach. Now look, there is indeed another Watchman that embodies Batman in some much less subtle ways. In fact, almost all the characters from Watchmen are a parody of another hero or villain from comic books in some way or form. The whole Watchmen story was made to deconstruct and satirize the idea of superheroes and to make a political commentary. Now while Rorschach himself was very obviously modeled after the Question, he is a much more gritty and brutal character who lives by such an extreme sense of justice that it makes me, and a lot of other people, believe that Rorschach's character is likely what would happen to Batman if he was real, or if he just went a little bit off the deep end. He is a hero that you root for, but you almost feel as though you shouldn't because of his anarchist ways, and while that is not exactly Batman, the grizzled ordinary man with a dark past who who is a masked detective who sneaks into crime scenes and beats criminals to a pulp in the middle of the night, that's got Batman written all over it.
And at 7, Batmite. Batmite was a mischievous imp who appeared as a small childlike man donning an ill-fitting Batman costume with a black lightning bolt symbol. Hailing from another dimension, Batmite possessed nearly limitless magical powers. In his dimension, the resident imps idolized the heroes of Batman's world and would mimic their actions and adventures. Batman happened to be Batmite's favorite hero, obviously, leading to the imp visiting him on multiple occasions, often orchestrating peculiar events just to witness his hero in action. Despite his admiration though, Batmite was more of a bothersome pest than a supervillain, often realizing his actions had upset Batman and then leaving him alone. During his first visit to Earth, Batmite used his magical abilities to enhance Batman and Robin's crime-fighting efforts, albeit causing more trouble than assistance, but Batman eventually requested that Batmite apprehend the criminals himself. After fulfilling Batman's request, the imp complied and departed, vowing to return someday. Batmite did reappear later, this time causing chaos, not only for Batman and Robin, but also for the newly introduced Batwoman. So yeah, I mean, he's an imp, and imps are always shifty, okay? We know that. It's been a thing. And at 6, Super Batman. When Dr. Wayne and Mrs. Wayne discover a baby named Kal-El in a mysterious spacecraft, they choose to raise him as their own child. They give him the name Bruce and instill him with a deep respect for all individuals regardless of social class or race. Mrs. Wayne, with her nurturing love, cultivates his heart, while Thomas Wayne, though emotionally reserved, proves to be a kind and compassionate father. Recognizing Kal-El's incredible abilities, his speed, agility, and unbreakable bones, Dr. Wayne focuses on pushing Bruce's mental limits rather than his physical ones, since, that's not really an issue. He imparts Bruce with the belief that cowards and bullies resort to violence, but Bruce, as someone exceptional, should aspire to be something higher, something better. Following the tragedy of his parents' death, Bruce withdraws from the world, finding solace in his parents' mansion. Consumed by a profound hatred for violence and death, the haunting images of death torment his sanity. However, one fateful day, a group of robbers invade his home. Bruce, unleashing his powers, brutally attacks them, tearing them apart with his heat vision. It is in this moment that Bruce realizes the potential of his abilities and resolves to utilize his powers for a greater purpose and adopts the identity of Batman, a symbol of justice and protection. So basically, it's if Superman was Bruce Wayne, which is dope as hell. It's from Superman Speeding Bullets, in case you were wondering. Check it out, it's actually really cool. Halfway through into number 5, John Paul Valley. John Paul Valley, also known as Azrael, was a vigilante who once operated in Gotham City. During a short period, he temporarily assumed the mantle of Batman after the original Dark Knight was incapacitated by Bane. However, his time as Batman was marred by a descent into insanity, leading to dire consequences. As Batman, John Paul succumbed to the darkness within himself, unleashing a brutal and merciless brand of justice upon minor criminals. He inflicted permanent damage to his adversaries, leaving them crippled and beyond recovery, and one such instance was when he ruthlessly assaulted the Tallyman, mistaking him for the original Batman and retaliating for an attempted assassination. In his tumultuous tenure as Batman, John Paul also thwarted the Trigger Twins during a train heist and confronted Mr. Freeze at the Gotham morgue. These confrontations further showcased his unpredictable and aggressive nature as he struggled to maintain control over his actions. Ultimately, John Paul's time as Batman came to an end as he was forcibly removed from the role, but he returned to his original identity as Azrael. His tenure as Dark Knight serves as a cautionary tale, but also he went insane and started seeing Batmite, but not the real Batmite. It's a whole other thing. It's weird. Man, it's weird. And at 4, Vampire Batman. As Batman investigates a series of gruesome deaths in Gotham City, only to discover that the killer is none other than Dracula, the legendary vampire. Not even a joke, actually a thing. Batman teams up with a rogue vampire named Tanya to stop Dracula and his brood from terrorizing the city, but to do so, Tanya provides Batman with a blood substitute after turning him into a vampire to spare him from the cycle of death and killing that comes with being bitten, because you have to drink blood in order to keep living, so they give him a blood substitute to kind of stop that so he has it inside himself. And in order to destroy Dracula's minions, Batman lures them into the Batcave where Tanya and his followers engage them in combat. Batman detonates multiple explosives in the cave, destroying the Wayne Manor and exposing the cave to sunlight, which ultimately kills all the vampires within it. Batman then confronts Dracula on his own and impales the vampire lord on a tree that has been struck by lightning, because this is supernatural and you need something more than just chopping their heads off. This act, however, comes at the cost of Batman's humanity as Dracula drains the last of his blood. Nevertheless, Batman assured his friend Alfred that he had nothing to fear, because as Batman with new vampiric powers, he will live on forever. But I'm pretty sure that this doesn't doesn't go well, and I'm pretty sure he tries to take over the world. Don't quote me on that, but if you want to know for yourself, check out Batman and Dracula Red Reign. Getting close to the end, in at number 3, Elliot Ness. Elliot Ness, a dedicated federal agent, was entrusted with the formidable task of dismantling the criminal empire of Al Capone during the era of Prohibition in Chicago. And this is also a real thing, this actually happened. But in this story, he was leading a team comprising of Danny Rasher, Frank Basil, and George Kochen. They became renowned as the Untouchables, earning the moniker bestowed upon them by the press. Despite their unwavering determination, they found themselves constantly constrained by legal limitations in their pursuit of justice. Driven by an unyielding desire to rid the city of crime though, Ness eventually adopted a clandestine alter ego and transformed into the Batman. Operating under the cover of darkness, his vigilante persona straddled the fine line between law enforcement and vigilantism. This dual role allowed him to operate outside of the confines of the law, using unconventional means to bring down the criminals who eluded traditional justice. But since he was actually a federal agent, he was able to, do things enough so that they couldn't just say, hey, he's a vigilante, this doesn't count. Elliot Ness, the federal agent turned into a masked crusader, undertook the mantle of Batman to confront the criminal underworld both within and outside the boundaries of the law, embodying a symbol of unwavering justice, but who also hunts Kronos with Dean Winchester on the weekends. But ultimately, in at number 2, Zur-En-Arrh. The enigmatic phrase Zur-En-Arrh began appearing throughout the streets and dark alleys of Gotham City, often accompanying Batman's encounters with criminals like the Joker. As time passed, the phrase continued to manifest, typically as graffiti in the background, until one fateful encounter with the Black Glove, who shattered Batman's mind. Various leader Simon Hurt exploited a deep-seated psychological trauma within Batman, triggering a mental breakdown. In the wake of this devastating event, it was unveiled that Batman had constructed a backup personality dormant within his subconscious for years, awaiting the activation code Zur-En-Arrh. This alternate persona transformed Bruce into a deranged Batman that called himself Zur-En-Arrh, which is a twisted reflection of his former self. Empowered by the persona of Zur-En-Arrh, Batman confronted the Black Glove at Arkham Asylum, where they sought to wager his life in a treacherous gambling game. He also faced off against the Joker, but despite his valiant efforts, he ultimately succumbed to defeat, entombed alive within the asylum's graveyard. That's so messed up. That's insane, dude. God. And finally, in at number 1, Lovecraft Batman. After witnessing the brutal death of his parents during childhood, Bruce Wayne embarked on a relentless quest spanning 2 decades to unravel the mysteries of criminal behavior. However, everything takes a dramatic turn when he, along with his trusted companions, venture to the Antarctic in search of an expedition team led by the eccentric socialite Oswald Cobblepot. What awaits Bruce in this frozen realm, though, is a peculiar sight. Cobblepot wandering alone in the icy wilderness, while one of his crewmen, Grendon, had transformed into a lifeless yet animated corpse, unearthing a creature trapped within the frozen depths. Driven by the sense of duty, Bruce seized the opportunity to bring Grendon and the unearthed creature back to Gotham under his custody. However, as the backdrop of the crime-ridden Roaring Twenties sets the stage, Bruce becomes entangled in a web of connections that link Gotham's dark past to his own father, his parents' death, and a slain scientist named Kirk Longstrom, who possesses the ability to communicate with bats. Through his investigations, Bruce discovers that he alone possesses the power to thwart the sinister cult of Ghoul, who seek to bring out the demise of Gotham and the world itself. Basically, this is Lovecraft Batman, okay? Think Cthulhu but Batman, and that's what you get.
Number 10, the Dawnbreaker. The Dawnbreaker was so unstoppable that he managed to destroy his entire world. This version of Bruce Wayne hails from the dark multiverse, from Earth -32. Here, Bruce's story goes as anticipated in the beginning, with him being just a child when his parents were gunned down by Joe Chill. However, young Bruce in this tale is instead granted a Green Lantern ring following his parents' deaths, and ends up joining up with the Green Lantern Corps. The oath of Green Lanterns, though, does not necessarily resonate with Bruce, with him only seeing his ring as a means for him to get his revenge. Despite the fact that the Green Lantern's rings normally cannot be used to kill, Bruce pours his inner darkness, his void of emotion, into this ring, corrupting it and thereby willing it to kill, and even using it to temporarily raise the dead. He goes on to kill all of the criminals of Gotham, face off with the Green Lantern Corps and successfully kill them and the Guardians of the Universe, and of course destroy the entire world. Well, his entire world. a world. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by clicking that like? Number 9. Helena Wayne. Helena Wayne goes on to take up the Batman mantle on Earth 2. The New 52, Earth 2 that is. This version of Helena Wayne was helping her father to fight against an army of parademons as his Robin when she was transported to another world. Now on this Earth 2, Helena Wayne is actually the daughter of Bruce, so yeah. Despite the fact that her father did not survive that battle, Helena and Supergirl both did, being transported to the Prime Earth continuity. While here they initially were also unstoppable in their search to find a way home, at least initially. Despite the fact that Huntress, aka Helena Wayne, the daughter of Bruce Wayne and Selina Kyle, would eventually give up on this dream, she and Supergirl would also eventually be returned home to Earth 2. Once there, Helena would go on to also take up the mantle of Batman. Number 8. The Batman. I think one of the most unstoppable Batmen I've seen recently, despite his youth, would be our Year 1 Batman from the now Elseworlds DCU movie The Batman. In this film, Batman is played by Robert Pattinson and is presented as a version of Bruce who is still kind of struggling to find his footing in the city of Gotham as a hero. In fact, many people actually fear and revile Batman at this point, GCPD included, who, other than Jim Gordon, are not really on his side. However, despite being less experienced in comparison to some of the older, more established versions of the character, I would say that Batman, against all the odds here, is still impressively unstoppable. This likely has to do with the fact that he is not only attempting to prove himself as an ally and force of good to the city and its people, but also kinda to himself, trying to find a purpose in a world that he seems to have become increasingly disconnected from. In the end, Batman realizes that hope above all else is one of the most important things, not fear, and we see him begin to make his way down the path to becoming the hero that Gotham needs. Number 7. Justice League of Assassins. In the alternate future reality of Earth 14, the JLA is a little bit different. Instead of being the Justice League of America, they are known as the Justice League of Assassins, which still perfectly fits that same acronym, so yay. JLA. Like in the main reality, Batman also ends up joining this team. The world they live in seems to be a post-apocalyptic war zone when we see the JLA in issue number 15 of the 2016 Superman series. Despite their most valiant efforts, the Justice League of Assassins, including Batman, end up defeated and killed by the Prophecy. Batman actually ends up losing his head as a result of this fight. He's like the first one to go. Gets his head shot clean off. At least he still gets to finish what he was saying though. As his head pops off. Number 6. Helena Wayne. In the alternate future reality of Earth 2, it is Helena Wayne, Batman and Catwoman's daughter, who lives on to carry on the Batman legacy. Helena Wayne is often known by the name Huntress, not to be confused with Helena Bertinelli, the Huntress of the main continuity, but eventually goes on to take up her father's mantle of Batman. Yeah, not Batwoman, just Batman. Kinda love it. We haven't gotten to see too much of Helena's Batman in action, but I have always loved the idea of Catwoman and Batman settling down together and having a daughter who would one day be inspired to carry on their legacy and become a hero using either of their superhero names in their honor. Number 5. Dark Knight Returns. This is an older version of Bruce from Frank Miller's alternate future reality of Earth 31. Here Batman comes out of retirement when Harvey Dent returns. To make matters worse, the Joker also escapes custody. Not only does Batman have Dent, the Joker, and the criminal scum of Gotham to contend with, but Superman is also after him as well. In this reality, Superman had become a government hero, becoming the loyal ally to the President of the United States. Kind of like his guard dog, really. And the President of the United States does not take too kindly to Batman's return. In the end, the two must face off in a famous fight that would go on to inspire multiple narratives, including the Batman v Superman film from the DCEU. Number 4. Damian Wayne. One of the darkest Batmen to arise would be Damian Wayne's Batman. Damian takes up the cape and cowl in a possible future story featured in Batman issue 666. Get it? 666. Known as Batman in Bethlehem. Batman in Bethlehem is a story where in the future, Damian Wayne sells his soul to Satan in order to ensure Gotham's protection. This drastic measure happens in a world where people really are looking for some kind of security as climate change, war, and acts of terror threaten the entire planet, turning it into a hellish futuristic landscape. This future version of Damian, who becomes Batman, also seems to be impervious to gunfire and no longer restrains himself from killing those who oppose him. Kinda like My dad was here so that I could like be this Batman later. I feel like Daddy Batman would not be too happy with you, Damian. He would be like, don't kill people, but you're gonna do what you're gonna do. I guess it's a different world. Number 3, Thomas Wayne. Although it might seem weird to put Thomas Wayne on this list as he's Batman's father and so in a way is like part of his past, in the alternate future known as Flashpoint, Thomas actually becomes Batman instead of Bruce. This is after Bruce is killed, causing Thomas to make a plan to get vengeance and inspiring him to become a vigilante fighting for justice on the streets of Gotham. Martha, however, kinda goes the opposite way with it. The death of Bruce causes her to basically go insane. Unable to move on or let go, she ends up haunted by his memory and becomes the villain known as the Joker, becoming Thomas's sworn nemesis, despite the love that they once shared. What a tragic story. Number 2, Dick Grayson. Helena isn't the only one to carry on Batman and Catwoman's legacy on Earth 2. Let's not forget that before Helena was born, Batman had an adoptive son in the boy wonder known as Robin, aka Dick Grayson, often known as the original Robin across many different worlds. On Earth 2, Dick Grayson would end up taking his adoptive father's mantle before Helena did and operate as Batman for a time. He settles down with Barbara Gordon and the two even have a son together who they name John. Dick, however, loses the use of his legs when he becomes paralyzed by the Joker shooting him through the stomach, which damages his spine. Sound familiar? Dick would later become Oracle. In this reality, Barbara ends up as a cop who gets shot and dies while attempting to help her family flee Darkseid's invasion. Their son John grows up to become his Aunt Helena's sidekick Robin. Super cute. I like it. Not Babs' death though. I don't like that. That's not nice. Number 1, Terry McGinnis. When it comes to Batman, there are actually a lot of people who would be suited to don the cape and cowl, sometimes in his stead, and other times as those who would take up the mantle after he dies or he retires. In the case of Terry McGinnis, he was pretty much created to become the new Batman. Using Bruce's own DNA, Amanda Waller designed Terry as part of her project Batman Beyond. She basically overwrote the reproductive DNA of Terry's father and chose the McGinnis family to create the modern genetic Bruce Wayne duplicate because their psychological profiles were close matches to Bruce's own parents, Thomas and Martha Wayne, which means that, you know, when Terry grows up he should be like pretty much a perfect replica. Even more so if his parents had been assassinated like Amanda wanted, but didn't work out for Waller there. Probably for the best though. I don't think you should assassinate people's parents just to turn them into Batman. That seems pretty messed up, even for Amanda Waller. Number 10, Reverend Bruce Wayne. Reverend Bruce isn't particularly scary to begin with, but the world he comes from and the fight he fights is definitely scary. This is a version of Batman who isn't just taking up the mantle to fight his parents' killers and rid Gotham of crime, but instead is attempting to fight against a whole political and societal system. In the Elseworlds story Batman Holy Terror, the course of history is changed somewhat so that America is basically still part of the Commonwealth. As such, it turns out that the seemingly random mugging and murder of Bruce's parents was not actually so random, and was actually a government hit that was later made to look like a mugging gone wrong. When Reverend Bruce finds out about this, he dons a demon costume that once belonged to his father Thomas and sets out to investigate. He also goes on to find out about government-run human experiments and an alien whom they captured, raised, and later killed with green rocks when he became too hard to control. Poor would-be Superman. Number 9, Gods and Monsters Batman. This version of Batman is not Bruce Wayne, but is instead Kirk Langstrom. In this reality, there is no Bruce Wayne to take up the mantle, and so Kirk ends up with the name himself. Not because he was inspired by a bat smashing through a window, of course, but because he is kind of actually part vampire bat. Kirk was a brilliant scientist who was working on a cure for lymphoma. He eventually figured out how to create this cure using bat saliva and nanotech to strengthen his experimental treatment. However, while it succeeded in curing his cancer, it also turned Kirk into a pseudo-vampire. While he remains a hero and typically only ingests artificially created plasma or even animals' blood, which can also help him to survive, he has also been known to feed on criminals from time to time. He's like, these criminals, nah, I gotta eat, they kinda deserve it, I'm just gonna eat them. And friends, before we move on to our next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more scary alternate Batman lists, of which, let's be real, there's a lot of scary alternate Batman out there, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Spooky thumbs up. Spooky spook. Number 8, DCEU Batman, or Batfleck if you prefer. Ben Affleck's Batman from Batman vs Superman especially is a much darker figure in comparison to the comics, and kind of in comparison to a lot of other Batmen that have been on the big screen. This is a version of the hero who has decided that he is willing to kill when he needs to. All in all, it seems to be implied that the death of Jason Todd is what reshaped Batman's morals here and caused him to readjust his code. Not only does he kill, but he also does something even worse in my opinion, branding some of the worst criminals that he fights against with a literal bat brand. These are the criminals that Batman has deemed to have done something completely unforgivable. And the thing is that people in prison in Gotham also know the significance of the bat brand, meaning that those who end up with one are basically marked for death. The idea here is that the inmates will carry out the death sentence that Batman has marked them with because they know that whatever this person did, it was one of the worst crimes. Otherwise they wouldn't have this brand. So not only is there an extra layer of fear, but this also shows a complete disregard for human life. I mean, at least a disregard for human life when it comes to really terrible criminals. Batman wants these criminals to live in fear, and he doesn't care what happens to them in prison. In fact, he kinda hopes that they end up dead.
Number 7. B-Rex. Some of the coolest stuff has come from the Dark Multiverse, and of all the alternate characters to come out of it, a Bruce Wayne who transferred his consciousness into the mechanical T-Rex in his Batcave has to be one of the most awesome. Now, as a Batman T-Rex, Batmanosaurus Rex, or just B-Rex if you prefer, Batman decided that he has been wasting time, not just completely wiping out his villains, and so he goes on a dinosaur rampage through Arkham Asylum, chomping and crushing inmates and staff alike. B-Rex gets recruited by the Batman Who Laughs, just like a bunch of other Dark Knights, and he was involved in the invasion of the regular multiverse and was even important to the revival of the Batman Who Laughs into the Darkest Night. Unfortunately, during the final battle, B-Rex and Batmage face off against Solomon Grundy, who had the strength to stop them both. Number 6. The Final Knight. The Final Knight is actually Duke Thomas, who was a sidekick to the Batman that the demon Barbados used as a gateway into the multiverse and who was ultimately transformed into Barbados the Dragon of the End. Now this Batman, alongside the rest of his league, who were also transformed into dragons, brought the collapse of their world, and Duke fled into the multiverse to survive. Duke eventually returns to face these dragons, only to be saved by that universe's Nightwing, who brings Duke to the surviving members of the Justice League, who band together and give almost all of their lives to fight the dragons, with Duke being the one to bring down his old mentor. After slaying the Dragon of the End, Duke turned his hide into crazy awesome armor and wielded Nightwing's massive battle axe. Now calling himself the Final Knight, he escapes his crumbling reality and sets out into the Dark Multiverse to become one of its only real heroes. Number 5. The Batman Who Frags. Yes, we are sticking with the Dark Multiverse still, and I will for the next point too, but I promise that is not a negative, and I can prove that to you by telling you that this version of Batman is a mix with Lobo. In an attempt to gain their powers, this Batman injected himself with Zarnian DNA, Zarnians being the race that Lobo is the sole survivor of. This did totally give Batman the insane super strength and healing factor that we often attribute to Lobo, but it had the maybe expected downside of completely changing Bruce's personality as well. He became much more aggressive, stabby, and volatile, and he also picked up one hell of a potty mouth. Batman also gained a much more similar look to Lobo as well, and I would be a liar if I said that this guy didn't look absolutely amazing. He's so cool. Unfortunately though, he isn't as cool as the real Lobo, and couldn't quite cut it when he was sent to capture the guy, instead finding himself trapped in a universe called Loboland, where he was forced to face a Lobo Justice League. Yes, it is as crazy as it sounds. Number 4. Dark Father. Okay, last Dark Multiverse Batman on this list, I promise, but also arguably one of the most alarming. That's because this version of Batman brought about the end of Darkseid, and in doing so, gained the evil god's abilities and even took on his appearance. He mastered the anti-life equation and controlled a massive army of para-Robins instead of the usual para-demons. He gave up the anti-life equation to his Superman, but he still went on to work with the Batman Who Laughs and invaded Earth Zero. Dark Father defeated the Teen Titans, the Titans, and Superman, which resulted in the destruction of the moon. He then built a new Apokolips inside of the core of the burnt out sun, and he kept Superman and many others imprisoned there until Batman, Wonder Woman, and Harley Quinn were able to come to the rescue, freeing Superman, who punched Dark Father into space. there he goes, look at him. Number 3, Red Sun. The Batman appearing in one of the greatest Superman stories ever, Red Sun, is not some crazy powerful amalgamation of characters. In fact, I'd say that he's considerably weaker than a number of alternate Batman on this list, but he is still Batman. In this dystopian Earth 30, where Superman became a tool of Stalin and his Soviet Union, Batman has become the most wanted man in Russia. As an adult, he became a blight on the Soviets and terrorized them all for revenge on Pyotr Rozlov, the captain of the police who brought the demise of Bruce's parents. He became an idol for those who wanted to oppose Superman and his regime. Eventually, Rozlov turned on Superman and convinced Batman to take down the Man of Steel. So, he stole Wonder Woman, bound her with her own lasso, and drew Superman into a trap where he then bombarded the hero with simulated red sunlight. He forced the weakened Superman into a cellar to lock him away forever, but alas, Wonder Woman managed to destroy her own lasso and remove the generator powering the lamps. Unwilling to be locked up and lobotomized like everyone else who opposed Superman, Batman detonated a little boom boom that he implanted in his own small intestine. But before he passed, Batman revealed to Superman the truth of Rozlov's treachery and got his revenge in a really roundabout way. Number 2, Flashpoint Batman. With the loss of his son at the hands of a mugger, in the alternate Flashpoint timeline, Thomas Wayne was driven to send criminals to the afterlife as the ruthless vigilante Batman. His first victim would be Joe Chill, the very mugger who ended the life of his son. Now, originally planning to poison Joe, Thomas went the much more reasonable route of pummeling with his bare hands. This act drove his wife, Martha Wayne, into insanity, cutting a grin into her own face and becoming this timeline's version of the Joker. Thomas has a more important mission to him than his war on crime though, restoring his son's life. He meets the Flash, helps restore his powers, learns of the alternate timeline where Bruce actually lived, and assembles an alternate timeline Justice League, and together they restore the original timeline. Thomas eventually enters into the current DC timeline, and wishing for his son to stop being Batman, he teams up with Bane to completely break Bruce. But it fails. Since his introduction in Flashpoint Volume 2 Number 1 in July of 2011, Flashpoint Batman, Thomas Wayne, has been a complex, interesting, and infamously fan-loved character. And finally, in at number 1, Owlman. The crime syndicate of America hails from the strength-obsessed Earth 3, and is a twisted, evil version of the main universe Justice League of America. The Batman of this villainous league isn't a Batman at all. In fact, he isn't even Bruce Wayne. No, he is Thomas Wayne Jr., also known as Owlman. Thomas Wayne Jr. was the eldest son of the Waynes, yes, the older brother of Bruce in this world. He believed that his parents were managing their wealth poorly, and for that reason alone, Thomas decided that they needed to go. He tried to convince his younger brother Bruce to help him in this endeavor, but when the time came to do the deed, Bruce was pretty hesitant and attempted to dissuade Thomas. Perceiving this as a sign of weakness, Thomas took Bruce to the afterlife, while his butler and servant, Alfred, who would become known as the Outsider, ended the lives of their parents. Becoming the villain Owlman, Thomas asserted power, dominance, and control over the city of Gotham, forcing it to be under his control. There is a lot more to this Owlman, but what we need to know is that he, alongside the crime syndicate of America, could not save their world from the Monitor, and so they fled it, invading the main DC universe and bringing us the Forever Evil story, which is probably one of the most awesome stories to come out of the New 52.
In at 10, Jim Gordon. In the wake of Batman's apparent death against the Joker, plans for a new Batman were discussed. With Powers International laying the groundwork for a Batman-inspired task force, their first candidate chosen to model the program was Jim Gordon, who was initially hesitant to fill Batman's shoes but eventually agreed. Going through intense government training and getting surgical muscle implants, Gordon was given the first model of the new Batman robot armor, which he nicknamed Rookie, and took to the streets as the new Batman. By complete chance, he finds Bruce Wayne and informs him that he has taken up the reins as Batman, and as Gordon hears several different reports about Bruce Wayne being found dead throughout Gotham, he works with Batman to figure out that a Batman from an alternate dark universe, known as the Batman Who Laughs, is the one responsible. Tracking him down, Gordon seeks help from his estranged son, James Jr. However, another dark version of Batman arrives and introduces himself as the Grim Knight. But it's certainly jarring to see Batman go from like this this like big bulky hero to a lanky Jim Gordon, he looks fragile, but I mean still, it's kinda dope that Gordon becomes Batman. In at 9, Flashpoint. Thomas Wayne's Batman from the Flashpoint timeline is a fascinating and tragic character, and honestly, one of my favorite versions of Batman. In this alternate universe, it was Bruce Wayne who was killed in the alleyway, causing his father, Thomas, to become Batman instead. Unlike his son's more traditional superhero version, Thomas Wayne's Batman operates more like a vigilante, using brutal and even lethal tactics to take down his enemies. He's a hardened and embittered figure who has given up hope for justice in a world riddled with corruption and violence. And I mean, given his origin, I kinda get it. I understand why. Despite his brutal methods though, Thomas is driven by a deep sense of love and protection for his wife Martha, who has gone insane and actually become the Joker in this reality after the loss of their son. He'll stop at nothing to try and save her, even if it means crossing moral boundaries. Thomas Wayne's Batman is a dark and tragic twist on the traditional Batman mythology, and he reminds us that the choices we make, even the ones made with the best intentions, can have unforeseen and devastating consequences. But also he killed Reverse Flash, which is pretty dope. In at 8, Red Rain. Batman investigates a series of gruesome murders in Gotham City, only to discover that the killer is none other than Dracula, the legendary vampire. Batman teams up with a rogue vampire named Tanya to stop Dracula and his brood from terrorizing the city, but in the course of it, Batman actually makes Tanya turn him. Yeah, he becomes a vampire to fight the vampires. Tanya then provides Batman with a blood substitute to spare him from the cycle of death and murder that comes with being bitten by a vampire, but in order to destroy Dracula's minions, Batman lures them into the Batcave, where Tanya and her followers engage them in combat. Batman detonates multiple explosives, destroying Wayne Manor and exposing the cave to sunlight, which ultimately kills all the vampires inside it. Batman then confronts Dracula himself and impales the vampire lord on a tree that had been struck by lightning. This act, however, comes at the cost of Batman's humanity, as Dracula drained the last of his blood. Nevertheless, Batman assured Alfred that he has nothing to fear, as the Batman, with his new, literally vampiric powers, will live on forever. The most Batman version on this list, if I'm honest.
Number 7, Night Owl. With that said about Rorschach, we might as well talk about the much more obvious knockoff of Batman from the Watchmen comics, Night Owl. Just looking at Night Owl, you know he is meant to inspire the idea of Batman. Also, if you know DC Comics well enough, you probably know about Earth 3's Batman, aka Owlman or Thomas Wayne Jr., and the physical similarities there are obviously even more apparent. But Night Owl is actually intended to be a parallel of Blue Beetle, which may surprise you, but it's because of the inherited nature of the Night Owl name, the same way there have been multiple Blue Beetles. But Dan Drayberg is wealthy thanks to his inheritance, he's a regular guy, he has an underground lair, he's incredibly intelligent, creating owl-themed vehicles. The source of his power is almost entirely reliant on his technology, and his fighting style focuses more on incapacitation over the violence used by some other heroes. But man, he is pretty damn mopey like all the time, which does kind of line up with Batman, but never this much. Number 6, Nemesis. Mark Miller, not to be confused with Frank Miller, which is something I do all the time, created Nemesis with the whole idea of what would happen if you took Batman but did everything completely different. Essentially, it asks what happens if Bruce Wayne used his wealth and resources to become a villain instead of a hero. The smartest man in the world, as the only supervillain in the world, with vendetta against police in all countries and a revenge for a lost childhood. Now, we gotta say, it doesn't quite hit the mark you might think. It's not exactly the greatest comic book. It kinda relies on shock factor and overabundance of the over-top violence just for the sake of it, and of course the opposition to the character of Batman. But that makes Nemesis perfect for this list. He wears all white, has a super crazy cool cave, and relies on his tools, subtlety, and his massive intellect. I almost wish it was better, but unfortunately centering the comic around an evil, cocky Batman who isn't really that likable, it didn't work out too well. Number 5, Nighthawk. In 1996, Marvel created a whole team of villains who were direct knockoffs of DC Comics' Justice League with the Squadron Sinister. This team was created by the Grand Master after coming into contact with a team called the Squadron Supreme, who came from a different universe. The Squadron Supreme had direct Marvel versions of heroes like Superman with Hyperion, Wonder Woman with Power Princess, and among others, Batman with Nighthawk Nighthawk, aka Kyle Richmond. Kyle Richmond is a multi-billionaire whose riches were built through his father's criminal enterprises, leading him to choose to use the money for good instead of evil. He's got a cape, he has pointy ears, he's animal themed, and no matter which version we are talking about, the character is incredibly brooding and runs around at night. There are at least 5 well-known versions of Kyle Richmond in the Marvel Universe. The Squadron Sinister one, who eventually joins the Defenders, the Earth 712 Squadron Supreme version, the Earth 31916 Kyle Richmond, who was a black man whose parents were taken out by white supremacists, leading him to become an anti-racism vigilante, the Iron Man-like Ultimate Universe Kyle Richmond, and the Kyle Richmond of Earth TRN 852, which is not a regular part of the multiverse, but a magical creation of the villain Mephisto, where the Avengers never existed. Also, you have to call me Nighthawk. I just wanted to say that. Number 4. Big Daddy. Another creation of Mark Miller, not Frank Miller. Big Daddy appeared in the Kick-Ass comics and the movies, and speaking of the movies, in them, he looks like an exact replica of Batman, but he acts a lot more like the Punisher, meaning he is heavily armed and not afraid to use those arms at all. That's also the case in the comics, but here he has a completely different costume that does not reflect Batman. But he is still a knockoff of Batman for one big reason: Hit Girl. Hit Girl is actually Big Daddy's daughter, who he trained to become an incredibly capable assassin and sidekick, and this is a lot like Batman and Robin. Initially, we are led to believe that Big Daddy did this for revenge against a mob boss who caused the passing of his wife, but over time, we learn that was actually all a lie. His wife was very much alive, and he practically took his daughter and went off on the run, training her and going on missions with her, all to give her an exciting life, funding the whole thing by selling comic books and looting criminals. It's a really interesting idea of taking someone and manipulating and turning them into a crime-fighting sidekick, which is arguably something Batman does all the time. Number 3. Moon Knight. Originally, Marvel's Moon Knight did start as a Batman takeoff in the panels of Werewolf by Night, but good golly, he has become so much more, and I think I can speak for almost everyone when I say, thank the Lord he has. But since this is a Batman knockoff list, let's talk about what these two characters share. They both run around in the night as Knights of the Night, and that was fun to say. Both of these characters are very wealthy, and they use that wealth to fund their crime-fighting ways. They both wear capes, utilize themed tools, and they're both, on the surface, messed up psychologically. And that's kind of where the similarities stop. Talking about psychology, Moon Knight is way more distorted than the Caped Crusader. Almost all of his stories revolve around him struggling with his sanity and multiple personalities, and the rest of the superheroes know how insane he is. And then there's his backstory. Moon Knight was a mercenary who, at the end of his mortal coil, was chosen by an Egyptian god to be its avatar, which granted him super strength, durability, stamina, self-sustenance, immortality, and divine mystical empowerment. I think on the surface, it's easy to draw parallels between Moon Knight and the Dark Knight, but on the surface only. Number 2. Midnighter. Hailing from the Wildstorm universe, which is now under the DC's purview, Midnighter is one of the founding members of the Authority, which is a team just like the Justice League yet again, only I think I find this team to be less of a parody and more of a legit thing of their own. The Authority are actually really cool, and I'm super pumped that we will be getting them in the DCEU. Midnighter goes hand in hand with his partner and husband, Apollo, and together they are very clear nods to Batman and Superman. Now, obviously, in order for them to work as their own heroes, things have to differ a little bit. For Midnighter, while he dresses in all black, is incredibly stealthy, is an unmatched hand-to-hand fighter, and utilizes tech, he is incredibly violent, which is a huge no-no for Batman. I'm talking almost Punisher levels of violence. He also has actual superpowers. His main one is battle precognition, which allows him to predict how a situation will happen before it starts, running through a given situation millions of times in his mind before the first move is even made. All of his major senses are incredibly enhanced as well, and thanks to a series of crazy implants, he has super strength, speed, durability, reflexes, control over his pain receptors, environmental adaptation, and an insanely good healing factor. And in at number 1 is Darkwing Duck. He is the terror that flaps in the night. He is the awkward goodbye that lasts way too long. He is Darkwing Duck. Darkwing Duck, especially in the comics, is like the Tim Burton Batman movies fused together with Donald Duck. And then, to keep things not entirely a ripoff, there are dashes of pulp comics and Golden Age heroes like Dick Tracy and the Shadow, the Sandman, Doc Savage, the Green Hornet, the Flash, the Lone Ranger, and even Zorro. The fictional city of St. Canard is a direct parody of Gotham City, but what makes the whole thing just so much better is the whole screwball mentality of Disney's Talking Ducks. The show ran for 3 seasons from 1991 to 1992 and tells the adventures of Darkwing Duck, aided by his sidekick and pilot Launchpad McQuack. In his secret identity of Drake Mallard, which is a direct parody of Kent Allard, the alter ego of the Shadow, he lives in an unassuming suburban house with his adopted daughter Gosalyn, with his whole struggle being to balance his ego against his desire to be a good father to Gosalyn and to help do good in St. Canard City, which is a parody of Gotham City, like I already said. Yes, it is a parody, so it's openly being like, we're ripping off Batman, but it's for comedy, which makes it totally okay.
Number 10. Helena Wayne Earth 2. Before there was Helena Wayne of Earth 2, there was Helena Wayne of Earth 2. Are you confused yet? Are you watching this with subtitles? This version of Helena Wayne was the first child of Catwoman and Batman from Earth 2. The original Earth 2, cause yeah, there's 2 Earth 2s. Look, I don't know what to tell you, it's DC, it's confusing. The original Earth 2 that this Helena Wayne is from was one of the worlds destroyed during Crisis on Infinite Earths. We later would see Earth 2 brought back, but of course slightly different, and technically in a different continuity. But on this Earth 2 that we're talking about, Helena's mother died in a tragic accident when she was blackmailed into returning to a life of crime. This is in part what actually inspired Helena Wayne to fight crime herself, taking up the name Huntress and avenging her mother's death. She tracked down the man responsible and learned that the photo that he had used to blackmail her mother was actually a fake. It showed her mother killing a cop, but in truth, Catwoman had never done such a thing during her time as Catwoman. Huntress in this version of Earth 2 is known for being a skilled fighter, martial artist, and archer. She typically fights with batarangs or a crossbow. Number 9. Helena Wayne, Earth 2. This alternate version of Helena hails from the same reality as Power Girl, who is also her best friend. Helena on Earth 2 is the daughter of Catwoman and Batman. And to be clear, this is the Earth 2 that came after the previous Earth 2 that we just talked about. I hope everyone's following this. I hope you're following this. I wish I had drawn like a diagram for everyone. There's this Earth 2 and there's this Earth 2. Helena here initially fought alongside her father as his Robin. However, she ended up leaving her world in what she thought was the pursuit of Darkseid after her father was killed during a Parademon's attack. Helena had tried to save her dad but was unable to, as the tower that he was in exploded, killing him. This version of Helena would spend a lot more time on Prime Earth with Power Girl, who took the name Karen Starr. The two would split up for a while but inevitably rejoin forces and find a way back to their Earth, their home. Back on Earth 2, Helena would take up her father's mantle, eventually becoming the new Batman. And if you're wondering, wait, no, do you mean Batwoman? Did you say that wrong? No, I mean Batman. That is the name that she takes. Batman, just like her dad. Being trained by Batman, Helena has a bunch of skills as his and Catwoman's daughter. She's especially well known for her skills with a crossbow, as an investigator, her stealth, and her fighting prowess. Before becoming Batman while living on Prime Earth, Helena went by the hero name Huntress. All the Helena Waynes, all the Huntresses, all the Bat babies. Bat baby. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to learn more about Batman's kids, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. He's got a lot of cool kids, and I'd like to talk more about them. Number 8. Terry McGinnis. Terry is basically Batman in the future. He not only has Batman's genes, but was trained by the old man himself, and he also has future tech to aid him in his missions as well. You might not think of Terry McGinnis as Batman's son, considering, well, he has 2 other parents who raised him and brought him into the world. But Terry is also genetically related to Batman. Amanda Waller helped to create Terry into the man that he is today. She manipulated his father's DNA to make sure that when Terry was conceived, his genes would actually match Batman's, aka Bruce Wayne's. This all happened as part of Project Batman Beyond, which was all about building a new Batman to replace the former. Waller also almost had his parents assassinated to help give Terry motivation to become a hero, but Andrea Beaumont's Phantasm, who she hired to do that job, ended up refusing to go through with it. But don't worry, he still becomes Batman anyways. Otherwise, he wouldn't have any skills for me to talk about, I guess. Could you imagine if I just had like most powerful children of Batman and they were all like accountants or something? And I was like, this is a better accountant than the other one.
And at 7, Gotham by Gaslight. Gotham by Gaslight is about 19th century Bruce Wayne recalling the killing of his parents as a child. Consulting with Dr. Sigmund Freud, yes that one, about the dreams he's had about the deaths of his parents and significantly bats, he then returns to Gotham City to become Batman and fight crime. The Gotham press begins to circulate the news of the Batman and soon links his appearance to a series of women found killed throughout the city. The identity of the killer is announced by Commissioner Tolliver to be Jack the Ripper. Eventually, Bruce is accused of the murders and sentenced to be and is imprisoned at Arkham Asylum. But with the help of Alfred, he escapes, dons the Batsuit, and stops Jack the Ripper, who is revealed to be Jacob Packer. Jacob then also confesses to causing the deaths of Thomas and Martha and framing Bruce in revenge for Martha's rejection. The comic was a one-shot from January of 1990, but became a fan favorite and is quite the interesting and dark tale, because Batman fighting Jack the Ripper, that's kinda dope. And at 6, Dark Claw. Logan Wayne is a combination of obviously Bruce Wayne and Logan, being first introduced in Marvel vs. DC number 3. At 5 years old, after witnessing his parents' killing at the hands of an armed robber, Logan Wayne was sent to live with his uncle in Alberta, Canada. His uncle was a member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and was ambushed and murdered by poachers a short time after his arrival in Canada. After the death of his uncle, Logan then went to live in a home run by nuns, and as soon as he was old enough, he enlisted in the Royal Canadian Air Force. Logan was submitted to the Weapon X project, the Canadian Super Soldier program, and it was here where Logan had adamantium bonded to his bones and learned of his metamutant nature. The Weapon X project was terminated due to its dual failure. Logan was ineffective as a weapon because he possessed a conscience, but this didn't stop him from being pretty damn badass. Having all the powers of Logan, as well as things like the Clawcopter and Clawmobile, I'm not even kidding, those are actually things, this is essentially a superpowered Batman, and I think that that's something we all wanted. Plus, Dark Claw, that's a great freaking name, dude. That's dope. That's terrifying. Halfway through, in at number 5, Red Sun. Imagine, if you will, Batman being a force for Mother Russia. The Batman of this story was born to a pair of dissidents who were later killed by Stalin's police force. He vowed to seek vengeance against Fyodor Roslov, the captain of the police force. After 20 years, he became the most wanted man in the Soviet Union and continuously challenged the authorities, executing acts of terror against Superman's regime and evading Roslov's police force skillfully. I couldn't help it. Just that name kind of makes you have to go into that accent. The people revered him as a legend, impossible to kill, and the ghost of killed dissidents. Roslov convinced Batman to team up with him and eliminate Superman, arguing that with Superman out of the way, Batman's vendetta against Roslov would be easier. Batman agreed and kidnapped Wonder Woman, using her lasso to draw Superman into a wasteland where he bombarded him with simulated red sunlight, and Batman intended to lock Superman away in a cellar, but Wonder Woman destroyed her lasso and the generator powering the lamps, which freed Superman. Batman then offed himself by detonating a bomb that was inside of his body to avoid being lobotomized and locked up, because of course that's gonna happen. In at 4, Batman the Merciless. When Ares, the Greek god of war, created a helmet that amplified his powers 100-fold, war broke out in an effort to stop him. For 2 years, Batman and Wonder Woman fought side by side to get close enough to attempt to stop the god. It was during this war that Bruce and Diana fell in love with each other. They and their allies made a pledge to kill the god of war in order to end his reign of terror once and for all, and as they finally mounted an attack to kill Ares, the two were able to get the helmet off the god of war. However, Diana was incapacitated, causing Batman to believe that she had died. Driven by grief, Bruce put on the helmet of the god of war to defeat Ares, despite being warned of its corrupting influence by Diana earlier on. Believing he could wield it mercifully while making war fair and just, he succeeded in killing Ares, but was turned into a merciless warrior himself, who started to see his old code as worthless. Despite learning that Diana had actually survived and was only stunned by Ares, Bruce was too addicted to the power of the helmet to let it go. He in fact chose to kill the woman he loved rather than risk losing the helmet. And then, with virtually unlimited power and no sense of morality, Bruce went on to wage war on the entire world. Because, you know, gotta love angry Batman. This is basically just Injustice, Superman, but Batman. Getting close to the end, and at number 3, Red Death. Red Death is a villainous amalgamation of Batman and the Flash. Possessing super speed and a bloodlust like no other, his origin on Earth -52 is a dark one. Batman started off fighting crime with Robin, obviously, but Robin's kept kept dying. Robin after Robin, none would survive. So Batman grew increasingly extreme within his methods and basically lost all sense of morality. This led him to then seek out Barry, the Flash, for his Speed Force powers. However, when Barry refused to comply, Batman used weapons from his various enemies to incapacitate Barry. Batman then rigged up a cosmic treadmill to his Batmobile somehow. I don't know how a treadmill is gonna help power a car, but then he attached Barry to the hood and drove them both into the Speed Force, causing a fusion of the two. The resulting entity was an evil Batman with super speed and a lust for death, while Barry's consciousness was trapped inside of Bruce's body. Oh boy. Red Death was later approached by the Batman Who Laughs and convinced to join Barbados's Dark Knights, whose aim was to conquer the multiverse, because of course it is. The logistics of how this came to be are unclear, but it's still freaking terrifying. I don't know how a treadmill makes the Batmobile able to get into the Speed Force, but you know what? 88 miles an hour, Marty. Let's go. Penultimately, in at number 2, Batman Beyond. Amanda Waller, director of Project Cadmus, needed a new Batman to continue to fight for justice, and saw genetic engineering as the solution. She created Project Batman Beyond by using Bruce Wayne's DNA to rewrite a male human's reproductive material, and found a couple in Gotham City with a psychological profile nearly identical to that of Bruce's parents, the McGinnises. Warren McGinnis was secretly injected with a nanotech solution that rewrote his DNA to basically be Bruce's, and then a year later, Terry was born with half of his mother's genetic material and half of Bruce's. To complete Terry's origins to become a crime fighter, Amanda planned to have the same trauma that inspired Bruce to become Batman happen to Terry's parents. Yes, this woman plotted to have a kid's parents assassinated right in front of him. After a night at the theater watching The Grey Ghost Strikes, Amanda had the Phantasm go over to kill Terry's parents. However, Phantasm refused to go along with the plan and allowed the McGinnises to continue on, unaware of what might have happened that night. Terry still became the new Batman, fighting for justice in a futuristic Gotham City, but still, come on, Amanda. I mean, like, I know you're Amanda Waller, but like, still, come on, okay? But also, Batman Beyond is like iconic and everyone loves it. And finally, in at number 1, The Batman Who Laughs. The story of Batman of Earth -22 was not much different from that of any other version of the Caped Crusader. When he was a boy, Bruce watched his parents get killed in an alleyway, vowing vengeance against crime. He trained for years and years to become a hero and then became Batman, fighting supervillains in Gotham. But everything went sideways for this Batman when the Joker started a killing spree across Gotham. The clown had discovered that he was dying from the same chemicals that had actually turned him into what he was, and wanted to take everyone with him. He killed all of Batman's enemies, including Penguin, Catwoman, Killer Croc, and the Ventriloquist, and the Joker also killed Commissioner Gordon, who accidentally sprung an acid trap on his notebook and melted his face off. After bombing a hospital and recreating the scene from Bruce's parents' death right in front of him multiple times, this Batman lost control and broke Joker's neck. Unbeknownst to Batman though, the Joker exhaled a toxin that contaminated Bruce's heart, which infected anyone close to him if he had died. In this case, it was Batman. So this caused him to snap and basically become the new Joker before taking over Earth -22 and later on gaining cosmic power. So yeah, I'm gonna put that at number 1. That's terrifying but also dope. And at 10, Bat Baby. In Batman number 147, published in 1962, we are introduced to Bat Baby, offering a glimpse into the distinctiveness of Batman during the Silver Age of comics. Contrasting the modern portrayal of Batman as a brooding and conflicted loner, this story reveals a peculiar side of the Caped Crusader. The narrative unfolds as Batman and Robin infiltrate a criminal hideout, initially gaining the upper hand. However, the criminals manage to escape when their mad scientist deploys a de-aging ray on Batman, basically think sky-high pacifier, regressing him into a 4-year-old child. Remarkably though, Batman retains his adult intellect and physical strength. Rather than being dismayed by this transformation, Bruce embraces it, donning a miniaturized cape, cowl, and Batman-themed overalls to become Bat Baby. The criminals attempted to ridicule him, but Bat Baby uses his enhanced abilities to foil their plans. So yeah, it is worth noting that de-aging superheroes was a curious trend in this era as well, with characters like Superboy and Wonder Girl being popular variations of Superman and Wonder Woman. However, this takes that to a literal extreme. The concept of a baby Bruce Wayne fighting crime did not have lasting popularity, and Bat-Baby remains a singular appearance in DC Comics, which was in Batman number 147. But I think we can all kind of appreciate that. In at 9, Satan Batman. In this future incarnation, Damian Wayne assumes the role of Batman following the demise of the second Batman. Possessing supernatural abilities and the willingness to take lives, Damian believed that resorting to lethal methods was necessary to combat crime, setting him apart from any other members of the Bat family. Despite the efforts of Father James Gordon and Alfred to guide him towards a different path, Damian remained steadfast in his convictions. A heated argument with his father resulted in Damian severely injuring him with a dangerously close stab wound, leading to his expulsion from the Batcave by Alfred. During his tenure as Batman, Damian faced a formidable adversary in the form of Michael Lane, the former Azrael, driven by an unhinged obsession to destroy Batman under the influence of Simon Hurt. As chaos engulfed the planet, Gotham became a quarantine city overrun by Joker-affected inhabitants, and Talia al Ghul, Damian's mother, ordered the city's annihilation through a nuclear strike authorized by Simon Hurt, who had risen to the highest echelons of the American government. Remarkably, Damian survived the cataclysmic blast due to a pact he had made with Dr. Hurt, so I don't know what Simon was thinking, really, okay? He didn't think that one through. In at 8, Dark Claw. Logan Wayne is a combination of Bruce Wayne and Logan, being first introduced in Marvel vs. DC number 3. At 5 years old, after witnessing his parents' death at the hands of an armed robber, Logan Wayne was sent to live with his uncle in Alberta, Canada. All hail the North! His uncle was a member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, basically the Canadian FBI, and was ambushed and killed by poachers a short time after Logan's arrival in Canada. After the death of his uncle, Logan was sent to live in a home run by nuns, and as soon as he was old enough, he enlisted in the Royal Canadian Air Force. Logan was submitted to the Weapon X project, after that, the Canadian Super Soldier program, and it was here that Logan had adamantium bonded to his bones and learned of his meta-mutant nature. And since this is an amalgam, they are both considered metas and mutants, because that's basically the same thing between the universes. The Weapon X project was terminated due to its dual failure. Logan was ineffective because he actually had a conscience, but this didn't stop him from being pretty damn bad. Having all the powers of Logan, as well as things like the Clawcopter and Clawmobile, and I'm not even kidding, this is in essence a superpowered Batman, which I think we all should know is pretty dope. Although I wonder if he has a Claw credit card.
Number 7, Tim Drake. Tim Drake is known for being probably one of the smartest children of Batman around. Although Tim had parents in the original continuity of New Earth, he was adopted by Bruce Wayne. So at least then and there he was considered an adoptive son. In the current continuity, his backstory hasn't become quite as tragic as the former, and I believe his parents are still alive in that reality. Although I think he's still considered Batman's adopted son there too. So he has parents, but he's also adopted? I don't know. While Tim might not be the best marksman or fighter of the bunch of Bat kids, he is definitely the most intelligent and best detective when it comes to living up to Batman's legacy. Does this make him the most powerful? I don't know, it can depend on the mission that he's got, I guess. I would argue that smarts is actually one of the most powerful things or skills you can possess when it comes to heroics, but many others often measure power in how hard you can hit. So even though I kinda wanna put Tim Drake higher on this list, I feel like there's gonna be a lot of people that are gonna be like, but he's not the biggest muscles, which is fine if that's how you measure power, but how do you measure power? I mean, there's lots of ways to measure it. Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments. Number 6, Helena Wayne, last rites Batman/Catwoman. I promise this is the last Helena on this list, although honestly I really do love a lot of what they do with all the Helena Waynes. I love Helena Wayne as a character, and I wish that she was part of the main continuity. Let Batman and Catwoman be together and let them give us a Helena Wayne. This is probably my favorite version of Helena thus far. She is the one that appears as the daughter of Catwoman and Batman in Last Rites and Tom King's Batman/Catwoman series. This version of Helena is really just, I think, a little bit of an improvement of the redo that we saw with her character from New 52's Earth 2. She also has the investigative skills of her mother and father and is a skilled fighter and acrobat. Helena Wayne here goes on to become Batwoman in honor of both of her parents. Also, if you're wondering how Kate Kane feels about that, because you know, that's kind of her mantle, I'm not sure what she's up to in this reality, or if she exists. If you know more about Kate Kane here, please share with me in the comments. I'd love to learn more. I tried to do some research on that and I was like, I can't find anything, so I'm assuming Kate Kane is like, I feel nothing because I'm not here. Bye. Number 5, Damian Wayne. Probably one of the most powerful semi-natural born kids around, and definitely one of the most dangerous, is Damian Wayne. Damian is the son of Batman and sometimes villain, sometimes ally, Talia al Ghul. Depending on which story you were going with, his conception was pretty controversial, as it has been implied and interpreted mainly that Talia forced herself on Bruce in order to get pregnant with Damian. Damian also was only a semi-naturally born kid because he did not gestate in a womb, but instead was kind of like grown in a tube. He was raised initially by his mother, who then dropped him on Bruce's doorstep when he was around, I think, 8 or 10. Initially, he and his father didn't get along too great, partly because of Damian's spoiled attitude, and partly because, despite still being a kid, he was already a murderous, deadly assassin that had been raised mainly by the League of Assassins. So, you know, that's gonna be a problem. Especially as, you know, Batman has a moral code, and Damian initially didn't really have much of a moral code. He was like, what's wrong? I can just decapitate people, that's fine. Why is it a big deal? They're bad guys. Number 4. Jason Todd. Everyone's favorite son of the Bat has got to be Jason Todd, or at least a lot of people's favorite son of the Bat. If that's not you, that's okay, but I know there's a lot of Jason Todd fans out there, so like, show yourselves. I see you. Well, Jason Todd has come a long way since he was first introduced in the comics, back when we knew him by the nickname J, Jason J. Todd. When he originally appeared in issue 357 of Batman, his backstory was actually very similar to former Robin Dick Grayson. Of course, his backstory would be redone and it wouldn't be this anymore, but initially, in the New Earth continuity, Jason Todd was introduced as an orphan whose parents were both originally acrobats who had died. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Like Dick Grayson before him, Jason was taken in by Bruce Wayne and trained to become his new Robin. Bruce even seemingly adopts Jason in this version of the story, making him one of the Batman's adopted kids. And I think even in Prime Earth continuity we consider him an adopted kid, although I don't know if he's formally been adopted. Jason Todd now, however, has more of a challenging relationship with Bruce Wayne in the current Prime Earth continuity, due to the fact that he has no problem killing villains when needed, and often uses lethal force and firearms against them when he fights. Jason Todd is known for being one of the most gifted and brutal fighters in the DC universe. But Jason's not just a bruiser, he's also got a sharp mind as well, and perhaps even a bit of a magical power set since being revived in the Lazarus pits. There was also, I think for a time, we considered him to be immortal because of that, but I don't think that's a thing anymore. For those that want to be like, he's immortal! I don't know if that's true anymore, but it was a thing at one point that was implied. Number 3. Nightwing. While Dick Grayson is not born of Batman, he spent a good amount of time being raised by him and is actually an officially adopted child of Bruce Wayne's. After years of Dick being like an adopted son to Bruce, Bruce decided to actually fill out the paperwork and finally make it official. So yeah, there's actually paperwork for this one, friends. Nightwing is one of the most powerful Robins, Bat family members, and sons of Batman around. He is a great all-around kind of powerful. Instead of dominating in one specific field when it comes to Batman's skill set, Nightwing does a great job of excelling sort of in all aspects equally. While some might think that this makes him weaker overall because he's not like a super big powerhouse in one area, I'd argue it makes him stronger overall as a character, as it means he has less weak spots in comparison to some of the other heroes, anti-heroes, and even villains in the multiverse who have trained under Batman. Nightwing is a great detective, fighter, acrobat, and he has a great heart, which is part of the reason he's such an amazing hero. Number 2. Kull. Kull is the daughter of Wonder Woman and Batman from the Dark Multiverse. We don't as of yet know what Dark Earth Kull hailed from, only that she was raised and trained by both her parents before she turned to the dark side, joining the Batman Who Laughs, who in turn served Perpetua. During the Dark Knight's death metal event, Kull ended up in a fight against Wonder Woman, who was amazed by her strength and her skills as a fighter. To read more about Kull and her badass self, you can check out Dark Knight's death metal Trinity Crisis, and I know that the Dark Multiverse is kinda gone, but I do hope we get to learn more about Kull and her backstory. I hope that's like not the only time we get to see her. She just seems like such an interesting character to me, and also I miss the Dark Multiverse. I just want more Dark Multiverse. Please, please. She ranks high on this list because due to her heritage, she possesses an Amazonian physiology like her mother. This means she is not likely someone that you would want to come up against in a fight. And she likely also possesses her father's enhanced intellect and sense of resourcefulness, making her an even more dangerous enemy to face. Also, it's really rare, I think, that Batman and Wonder Woman get together in realities and actually have kids. I feel like that's not usually a thing that happens, so she's a rare one. Number 1. Jarro. Jarro is probably the strongest child of Batman to have ever existed, at least obviously in my mind. When it comes to his potential for power, he could technically conquer the entire Earth if he wanted to. Fortunately, he doesn't want to. Jarro mainly wants to be a good son and become the best Robin ever in his father's eyes. He was grown by Batman from a tissue sample he'd had of Starro the Conqueror. Batman grew and raised Jarro himself, teaching him how to be a good alien starfish and a good hero. Jarro has teamed up with his dad before to help the Justice League, and there's almost nothing that he wouldn't do for Bruce. Due to his unique alien physiology, Jarro has a slew of powers available to him, the main one being telepathy and mind control. He's also heckin' smart, possessing genius level intellect. Plus, he's the cutest. Like, I'm just saying, if we're doing a top 10 cutest children of Batman list, or even the Justice League, cutest children of the Justice League, I think that Jarro would also end up at the top. Like, he's pretty cute. Just putting it out there.